So combine Lord of the Rings with Alien Nation, add in a little bit of urban drama, throw in a little bit of Suicide Squad, mix it in with a little bit of Lethal Weapon, Men in Black and Bad Boys, and what have you got? You get this thing. Hi, I'm Danny Quinn, and welcome to another episode of First Impressions. On today's episode, Will Smith and Joel Edgerton are two cops tasked with hunting down a dark elf who wants to destroy the world in Netflix's first big blockbuster, Bright. So this movie is set in a world where humans and fantastical creatures such as elves, goblins, orcs and fairies have all coexisted since the beginning of time. And it pairs around these two cops, a human, Darryl Ward, played by Will Smith, and an orc, Nick Jacoby, played by Joel Edgerton. And while they're out on patrol, they come across a magic wand that everybody wants to get their hands on. Corrupt cops, gangsters, orcs, the FBI, and most troubling of all, dark elves. This movie is actually distributed by Netflix, and it's currently on their streaming system, and it's meant to be their first attempt at competing with the Hollywood big leagues. And it's directed by David Ayer, who primarily specialises in gritty urban dramas, given that he wrote Training Day, and directed the likes of End of Watch, Sabotage, and Street Kings. And this movie is like a combination of his previous work, with his recent directorial effort, Suicide Squad. But despite my admittedly mixed feelings about the rise of Netflix, which I will have to elaborate on further in another video someday, I was somewhat looking forward to this movie. I like the concept, but unfortunately Bright is a bit of a disappointment. It's kind of a messy film. It tries to do so much at once that it doesn't really excel in any particular area. It's trying to be a buddy cop movie, it's trying to be a gritty urban drama, it's trying to be a dark fantasy, and it has a hard time balancing all those different elements together. And disappointingly, considering the movie's rather wacky premise, it takes itself rather seriously. Yeah, there's a few moments of humour here and there, particularly between Ward and Jacoby whenever they're bantering, driving around, and there's a couple of one-liners interspersed during the film's action scenes, but they largely feel very forced and not all that funny or clever or witty. And for the most part, the tone of this movie is really serious, which doesn't really work because the movie just doesn't have that much substance in order to really back up the serious tone. And it doesn't help that a lot of the dialogue is either unintentionally humorous or made up of clunky exposition which involves the characters spelling out their motivations and accomplishments rather than actually showing them. The movie has a big problem trying to tell its story. There are a few moments where the satire and some of the concepts work really well. I like the idea that the orcs are gangsters and that the elves are very wealthy, privileged, upper class, which is something I think would happen if you were to take Lord of the Rings and put it in modern times. But I never felt like I was all that invested in this world, and most of the social commentary isn't really explored in that much detail. The movie just doesn't really have that much to offer outside of just running from one set piece to another. And the action in this film is fine, it's passable, but there's nothing all that unique, memorable, or anything even that exciting about it. There's a few chase scenes here and there that are largely very dull and forgettable, and a lot of the fight scenes in this film are edited to shit. It's not shaky cam or anything, but there's just so many cuts. Especially in this nightclub sequence where there's a lot of strobe lights and flashing, and it's almost impossible to make out what's actually happening. I know it's probably quite hard to make a set piece in a nightclub work, but if the likes of John Wick and Blade can do it, I really don't know what this movie's excuse is. And Ayer's directing doesn't really do the movie any favours either. It's like he's trying to combine the gritty urban drama feel of his older stuff with the more fantastical elements of something like Suicide Squad. But it doesn't really work quite as well as I think it should. It has a lot of the same problems that Suicide Squad had. Its tone kind of flies all over the place. If you've seen my Justice League review, I must sound like a broken fucking record right about now. It's basically Suicide Squad with an adult rating and slightly less poor structuring and editing. And again, I think I sound like a broken record considering this is exactly how I felt about Justice League. Oh, it's not very well structured and edited, but it's not quite as bad as something like The Snowman or Suicide Squad. It's not really much of a selling point. But ultimately, I think the main issue is that Ayer just wasn't the right choice to direct this picture. I know on paper he seems like he'd be a good fit for the material, but he really struggles when it comes to the movie's more fantastical elements. And while watching Bright, I just couldn't help but imagine how this movie would have turned out if somebody like James Gunn or Shane Black or Guillermo del Toro had their hands on a movie like this. They could have brought a real sense of spark and identity to it that this movie just lacks. However, the biggest issue with this movie for me personally is the relationship between Smith and Edgerton. This movie is at its heart a buddy picture, and I think I could overlook many of the movie's main issues if the relationship between Smith and Edgerton worked, if they had chemistry. And they just don't. They don't fly well together. There's a few moments where their dynamic works, but most of the time the chemistry just doesn't feel right. I think it's because the movie begins with them already assigned as partners, and yet they talk as if they've just been assigned together, even though it's established that they've already been working together for a little while now. I just feel like I've been plucked into the middle of the story somewhere. I feel like I've been plucked into its second act. And Will Smith unfortunately couldn't look more bored. He's really phoning it in here. His performance is just completely lacking his usual charisma and charm. And I think a lot of that stems from how inconsistently his character is written. He's an extremely unlikable asshole who openly despises his partner for being an orc, yet he constantly tries to stick up for him in front of others, and spouts out guff about how you shouldn't be so judgmental of others just because they're of a different race than you. Real rich coming from you fucking hypocrites. Granted, the rest of the acting is relatively fine. Lucy Fry does a decent job in the role of Tika, this elf that's trying to protect the wand that everybody's looking for. And the main standout is easily Joel Edgerton. He's probably the best thing in this movie. As Jacoby, he's this orc that's rather disliked among the other LAPD officers, and he's desperately trying to prove himself, but he's also torn between his duty as a cop and his orc heritage. But then you have the likes of Noomi Rapace, who is completely wasted in this stock villain role. She's playing this dark elf that's basically a mix between Enchantress and Nuada, the main villain from Hellboy 2. She never comes across as even remotely threatening or intimidating. She's a very bland and unmemorable villain, and to top it off, she's barely even in the film to make much of an impression. And because you got all these corrupt cops and gangsters and elves and orcs to deal with that also want the wand, the plot just gets very convoluted and messy. It's just a very unfocused movie. It is a great concept that's unfortunately not very well executed. The acting is very hit or miss. Smith and Edgerton just don't have chemistry together. The action's very standard. In fact, this whole movie is very standard. It's not quite as bad as the abysmal critical reception would have you believe, and I get the feeling that some people will probably like it. That's cool if you do, but the thing is, I didn't like it very much. I didn't think it was a very good film at all. So on a scale of 0 to 10, with 0 being absolute irredeemable shit, and 10 being an outstanding flawless masterpiece, I'm gonna give Bright a 4 out of 10. It's not the worst movie I've ever seen, and it's on Netflix if you want to check it out. But I'd personally recommend something like Zootopia or any of the Men in Black movies over this. They're more imaginative, more unique, more creative, more clever, and far more funnier than anything here. So Bright, have you seen it yet? If so, what did you think of it? Did you like it? Did you not like it? What did you like about it? What did you not like about it? Let me know down in the comments below. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed this video. Sorry I've been off for a wee while, I've been enjoying my Christmas holidays and well, taking in the fact that this is no longer 2017 but it's 2018. I don't know, it still feels like 2017 to me in a few places. And I will be wrapping up with a few more reviews and then my year-end lists, including my best, worst and most disappointing movies in 2017. Those will be coming at some point in January. But in the meantime, feel free to like the video, leave a comment and subscribe to my channel. If there's anything I can do to improve my presentation, let me know. I can also be found by Facebook, Twitter, email and Instagram. And until next time, I'm Danny Quinn, and I hope you have a pleasant evening.